In recent years, lawmakers updated firearm regulations to close specific legal gaps. But today, the federal court system is weighing whether those laws can remain. To understand the legal battles currently reshaping community safety in the United States, hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon. The modern system we use to track firearms and verify buyers has a very specific starting point: the Gun Control Act of 1968. Congress passed this legislation following a period of national trauma, driven by the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert Kennedy. The problem is that the 1968 law was written for an era of paper records and traditional manufacturing. As the internet emerged and technology evolved over the next 50 years, specific blind spots opened up in the regulatory framework. The Gun Control Act served as a foundational shield for decades, but its mid-century definitions created a vacuum that modern technology eventually exploited. The most prominent example is the ghost gun, an untraceable firearm built from an online kit. Shipped in pieces, they bypassed 1968 rules, avoiding classification as finished frames, meaning no serial numbers or background checks were required. The old system had other gaps too. The boyfriend loophole allowed convicted domestic abusers to keep their weapons if they weren't married to or living with their victim. Furthermore, the background check system lacked the authority to review juvenile mental health records for buyers under the age of 21. The prevalence of these loopholes coincided with a shift in public safety. Between 2019 and 2021, gun-related homicides in the United States increased by 45%. These compounding loopholes allowed prohibited buyers to bypass the system. The rise in untraceable weapons and violence led to a federal intervention. That intervention arrived in 2022 with the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It marked the first major gun legislation passed by Congress in decades. The legislation addressed the under-21 loophole directly. It mandated a new investigative period, requiring the background check system to pull and review juvenile criminal and mental health records before approving a sale to a young buyer. It also narrowed the boyfriend loophole. The law now ensures that a domestic violence conviction results in a failed background check, regardless of the marital status between the abuser and the victim. Finally, the act provided financial support for states to implement what are commonly known as red flag laws. These use a civil court process to issue extreme risk protection orders, which temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others. By updating the criteria for who is allowed to buy a weapon, the 2022 law pulled the core protections of the 1968 Gun Control Act into the modern era. While Congress addressed the background check criteria, the executive branch moved to address the physical hardware of ghost guns. The ATF issued a final rule clarifying that partially complete frames in buy, build, shoot kits qualify as actual firearms. By redefining these parts, they fall under the Gun Control Act. Sellers must now require a serial number and a full background check. With an update to the definition of a firearm, the ATF closed the physical loophole that online sellers had been utilizing. But these federal efforts to close the gaps are now being met with a series of judicial challenges. In a case known as Garland v. Vanderstock, a federal appeals court struck down the ATF's ghost gun rule, stating that the agency's expansion of the law went beyond what Congress originally authorized. These modern safety rules are being reviewed following a Supreme Court decision known as NYSRPA v. Bruen, authored by Justice Clarence Thomas. The Bruen decision established a new standard for the courts. Now, any modern gun regulation is presumed unconstitutional unless the government can prove the law is rooted in America's 18th century text, history, and tradition. This leaves lower courts with a difficult task. They must now find direct historical equivalents from the 1700s to justify modern regulations on domestic violence or 3D printed ghost guns. The future of community safety is no longer just a debate for Congress. It depends on how the Supreme Court maps 18th century traditions onto 21st century weapons. How do you think 18th century laws should apply to modern ghost gun kits? Let us know in the comments below. To keep following how these legal battles impact your community, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the video on your screen to keep watching.